Throughout our lives, many of us seek purpose, meaning, and understanding in ourselves, other people, and the world around us. The most common methods of doing so are either an analytical or spiritual approach. I try to do both, and I'd like to share what I've learned. What I want to say isn't necessarily true or untrue, simply an idea. It's not a matter of belief or proof. I am proposing a philosophy of optional perspective. My hope is to help us as a species reconnect with nature, to look past short-sighted conflicts, and possibly better understand our own existence. I am Terron, the Dark Beast, and this is the Theory of Spirit. Okay, quick disclaimer. Technically, this video isn't a theory yet. It's more of a working hypothesis. A full-fledged theory, to heavily simplify, is a collection of facts and observations and the explanation on how and why those things are happening. There's a whole lot more to it, and I highly recommend checking out channels involving scientific theories for better explanations. However, as for my video, I do attempt to give an explanation on the spiritual. And whether or not it can be considered a philosophical theory, I guess really depends on what you all think. To start, let's define what we're talking about. To clarify, I'm here to explain spirit, not soul. Soul is the idea of a consciousness, as we know and experience it, continuing after or even preceding a physical body's existence as its own independent entity, should there be one. But that's a topic I would like to go into much further detail in a future video. Spirit, on the other hand, I define as the essence of something, more so the identity. Take something like fire, for example, or should I say fuego, or maybe feu, feuer, hor, he, ag. I'll bet that was graceful. Sorry, this is what happens when numbnuts over here tries to speak languages he doesn't actually speak. The point is that all of these words aren't the thing itself. Words are symbols of the true thing. I, fire, am recognized and understood across the world. I may exist in different places, at different times, and have different names. I have countless bodies throughout space and time, physically separate, yet it's all still me. So what makes it me? So is spirit just a definition of physical form? What about a chair? When I say the word, I'm sure the first image that comes to mind is something like this. But I'm also certain that we've all seen variations. Even a large beanbag can be considered a chair. So its purpose makes it a chair? What about a rock formation that just happens to be chair-like enough for you to sit in? It was given an identity of a chair in that moment by an observer. What if some supernatural plot device event happened that caused all chairs and records of them to just vanish? All of our memories altered to remember life without there ever being chairs. How quickly do you think we'd reinvent them? Yeah, revolutionary invention. Now, these new chairs would probably look a bit different and be named differently, but would they in fact be fundamentally different from the old ones? Or would they be the exact same thing, even if separated by a period of non-existence? Would they be of the same essence? How about ideas and characters? Do these even count as real? Say I write a character who likes to take long scenic drives, go surfing, and uses telekinesis to build sandcastles. And his name is Robin Hood.
That's not Robin Hood.
Yes, it is. It's a fictional character I made up. I give him any name I want.
Okay, that's technically true, but we already have a very solid, collective understanding of Robin Hood's identity and the parameters that need to be met, with some creative flexibility, that makes an immaterial character the true Robin Hood. A foundation of identity.
It's important to note that whenever I say the word immaterial, I am referring to stuff like ideas, thoughts, and concepts. So, does a foundation of identity make all fictional characters real in the immaterial sense? What about actions and behaviors, things like war, or trade wars? These are distinctively different things, yet these behaviors have recognizably similar elements that can place them under a single category, just different types of like patterns. Sometimes we can even see mislabeling of essence in behaviors. Say a ruler calls themselves a president of a democracy, but there is no voting of any kind, and the president decides all policy on their own, even executing those who speak against them. It's clear to identify this as a dictatorship, a false ruler, the action's true spirit. Now, things can have multiple spirit components through association of patterns. I'll use a longsword as an example. A longsword is a type of weapon. It is made of metal, usually, and is European in origin. Like words, objects can be symbols that represent other spirits. A sword is often a symbol of authority. It can be seen to represent death, but also protection. It can be made of wood and have a purpose as a practice sword. Now it can symbolize youth and inexperience. It could be made with silver and now associated with the moon. Now take just the moon and you can link it to the ocean, or nighttime and dreams. Dreams and the ocean don't really connect directly to a sword, but through association, there's a web of spirit that can connect everything.
Sometimes, these connection points are universally understood simply by instinct. Other times they can be cultural or pack-specific, or purely personal and based on experience.
Now let's look at ourselves in the mirror for a bit. What are we? We are life, alongside many other beings. We are in the animal kingdom. We are mammals. We are humans. We have divided nationalities. We have our family tree. We have our family unit. And there's us as an individual. But is that as far down as it goes? Is our body really us? If we look inside, we find organs, bones, nerves, blood, parts. If these parts are truly us, would we be less of who we are if we were to lose an arm and replace it with a prosthetic?
Can we even count ourselves as an individual? There's a good portion of our body that is made up of microbes that inhabit us. There's many types of fungi, viruses, and bacteria with their own separate DNA that live on and in us, some of which we could not live without. Mitochondria, the classic powerhouse of the cell, is a bacteria. That's a different domain of life. Very much not human. Our bodies are more of an ecosystem than a person.
The obvious place to go from here is to focus on our mind as the focal point of our identity, our personality, thoughts, and interests. But how does that work? Our brain is made of a colony of neurons that receive signals from our sensory organs and processes that information through electrochemical means. Quick side note. Brains are often compared to computers, but it's important to know that they are very different structures with different capabilities. However, there are a lot of similarities between them worth mentioning. There are different types of like patterns. I highly recommend going into further research on this topic on more scientific channels. And whether or not our minds are purely deterministic, or if there's some butterfly effect element of chaos that could allow free will, is a topic for another video. So the question remains, what dictates how the cells of our brain interact? Well, chemicals. And chemical interactions are based on the atoms they are made of. And atoms are made of subatomic or elementary particles. And all the particle interactions are dictated by the four fundamental forces: the gravitational, electromagnetic, strong nuclear, and weak nuclear force. And the Higgs field gives the particles their mass.
Now all the elements that make up our bodies are made of three of the particles: up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. But so are all the elements of all the materials around you. Look at your hand, look at your screen, then realize they are actually made of the same stuff, governed and functioning by the same rules. The only difference between you and the ground you stand on is the pattern in which your particles are arranged. Now I'll ask you to think just how much the spirit of pattern can connect us.
Is blood in our veins like cars on the freeway? First responders to an accident like white blood cells and other cells responding to a cut? Are organs like factories in a city? Telecommunication like our nervous system? How about patterns of behavior and emotion?
Can an ocean be angry when it's stormy? Is a lake sick when it's polluted?
Can an ant colony be considered a brain? Is a forest an organism? In this way, spirits can come together and group up to form larger ones. Like a grain of sand having its own identity, its own unique micro-pattern. But it's also part of a desert, forming a much larger macro-pattern. This is where things like synergy, collectives, and emergence comes into play. Stuff coming together to form things greater than the sum of its parts. Whether it be individual living cells grouping up to form one big living thing like us, or a bunch of people forming a city. Do you ever feel how some cities have their own distinct personality? Or the classic idea of a nation being made of its people, not its land? Even if a city is destroyed, but the people survive and rebuild, everything may look and even feel a bit different, but the memories, connections, and culture can live on. Even when all the people die of old age and the next generation takes over, things may change pattern then, but in the same way we do as when we grow up. It is these larger patterns of both thoughts and matter that I call gods, entities of symbology, focal points of association, anthropomorphized representation of macro spirit. Now, the point in which a spirit becomes big enough to be considered a god is a matter of opinion. Like, at what point does a rock qualify as a boulder, or a stream to a river? Some cultures don't even make the distinction between the two. Another area of research that I recommend is in the Japanese kami of Shinto. In conclusion, it is my working hypothesis that spirit is the pattern of identity, the essence of a thing that distinguishes it from others while at the same time uniting things into larger categories, forming micro and macro entities, be they material or immaterial. In future videos, I plan to go more in-depth about some of the topics touched on here, as well as other areas my personal philosophy extends into. I would also like to formally introduce you all to the Pantheon of universal god archetypes that I have formulated, including the 12 goddesses and god-ends that have been aiding me in my discussion.
Hi.
Hope you all enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, and share if you'd like. Here's my Patreon if you want to make a monthly or one-time donation to my channel. It will be very appreciated. And with no more ado, we here bid you hail and farewell. See you next time.